China is aggressively expanding in the Pacific Ocean, but it stops just short of full-on war. And that's why the US also needs non-lethal weapons to deal with China. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. The Chinese Communist Party is already waging war against the U.S. and its allies. Sure, we aren't seeing missiles flying against U.S. military forces, but this is China we're talking about, the home of Sun Tzu. They know warfare. And in 1999, a couple of Chinese Communist Party colonels wrote a book on a whole new kind of warfare, unrestricted warfare, which makes use of all non-military means at China's disposal. Unrestricted warfare involves waging three warfares, which is pretty much what it says on the tin. Three warfares in the name include using a country's legal system and public opinion, as well as psychological warfare, to really get under the skin of a nation. More specifically, China uses three warfares to provide the legal basis for launching attacks and to delegitimize and demoralize the adversary, aka the most brutal form of war there is, bureaucracy. Bullets are somehow less cruel. The Chinese Communist Party's unrestricted warfare strategy is part of their gray zone warfare. Lots of warfare, very little bullets. Gray zone warfare escalates conflict short of war, without triggering UN Security Council resolutions, economic sanctions, or other international penalties. Like when China started building artificial islands in the South China Sea, and then used that to make territorial claims. Other countries told them to stop, but no one declared war. Then China militarized the islands. And now, no one can do anything about it because we don't want a war. Central to China's gray zone warfare in the South China Sea is the People's Armed Forces Maritime Militia, which is separate from the Navy and the Coast Guard. The Maritime Militia is made up of civilians, not soldiers, who work in the marine economy. They cover tasks like border patrols, surveillance, reconnaissance, maritime transport, search and rescue, and auxiliary support for wartime operations. They've been busy helping China protect its artificial island building efforts, often in the guise of fishing vessels. Man, unrestricted warfare is sneaky. And as if these jobs weren't demanding enough, they now have to work as military intelligence on top of it. It'd be like an Uber driver being forced to transport rockets while taking drunks home from the bar. Man, that 5-star general didn't even give me 5 stars. China's maritime militia has been involved in a lot of clashes with other nations, while giving the Chinese government plausible deniability. These vessels may be ramming other countries' ships or spying or doing other things that a normal fishing boat wouldn't do, but they're not actually firing weapons. And they're civilians, so it's not like the U.S. and other countries can just shoot down China's maritime militia. Well, I mean, considering what the U.S. spends on defense every year, it totally can. I'm pretty sure the U.S. could blow up Mars at this point. What I mean is it shouldn't. The problem is, because these vessels are unarmed, U.S. naval forces cannot respond with military force without significantly escalating the confrontation. According to U.S. Marine Corps Colonel Wendell Lineback, adversaries are taking videos of interactions with American forces, knowing that the Americans are limited by the tools they have and will either not respond to their aggression or will over-respond with lethal force that escalates the situation. That's why Colonel Lineback argues the U.S. needs to focus on creating non-lethal weapons. I'll explain after the break. Welcome back. China is threatening the world with its aggressive expansionism. And the U.S. military is reacting by preparing for conventional war. One thing that the U.S. military loves to focus on is enhancing the lethality of its tactics and weapons. Unfortunately for a lot of soldiers, they don't focus much on making the food taste any less lethal. I can't tell if this is scaly chicken or feathery fish. But given that China is waging unconventional gray zone warfare, the U.S. can't expect a purely conventional fight. The U.S. recognizes that it can't just shoot first at Chinese forces, so it's been stuck reacting after the fact. It's kind of like that slap game you used to play as a kid. You have to wait for them to make the first move, even though it would be much easier to just win by blowing them up with a drone. All these rules. That's why U.S. Marine Colonel Leinbach argues that the sea services need more and better non-lethal weapons. According to him, the U.S. needs intermediate force capabilities that give naval commanders more options beyond the binary choice of lethal force or no force at all. That way, when the Chinese regime pushes the boundaries of warfare, the U.S. can do it right back. In other words, the U.S. needs to fight fire with fire. Although fire is pretty lethal. More like fight dodgeballs with dodgeballs. If China's going to wage gray zone warfare, then the U.S. should as well. But the U.S. military lacks non-lethal weapons. Although I'm pretty sure what they call lunch is considered a non-lethal weapon in most cultures. The U.S. realized it needed non-lethal weapons in the 1990s, during operations in Somalia, or as you know it, where Black Hawk Down took place. Since 1996, the U.S. military has fielded over 50 types of non-lethal weapons, devices, and munitions in regions like Bosnia, Kosovo, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Too bad the U.S. military didn't leave only non-lethal equipment behind when exiting Afghanistan. Maybe the Taliban would have had a harder time taking over if they were armed only with pool noodles. The U.S.'s non-lethal weapons have often been used for security against civilian crowds. But there's more to non-lethal weapons than just crowd control measures like rubber bullets, beanbags, and pepper spray. The U.S. needs non-lethal weapons that can help deter adversaries like China in the ocean. Things like loud, long-range acoustic hailers, microwave-directed energy systems that disrupt electronics and engines, millimeter-wave-directed energy systems that make people feel hot without burning them, lasers that don't cause permanent eye damage, flashbang munitions, even synthetic slime made from hagfish, which can be useful for disabling small boat propellers. Maybe Nickelodeon could be of some help. That's why Colonel Leinbach is heading up the non-lethal weapons program. The goal is to give the U.S. military more flexibility for different situations with non-lethal weapons development. In comparison to lethal weapons, intermediate force capabilities may reduce claims of excessive force. They can also be a non-destructive means to mitigate an adversary's first mover advantage. It can also create dilemmas for adversaries where they either have to concede or divert resources. And of course, if they choose to escalate, then that's on them. Modern warfare really is all about trying to get the other side to make the first move. It's kind of like being on a date that you're not sure is a date. And you want to kiss them, but you don't want to make it weird if it's not a date. So you try getting them into a position to decide to kiss you first. Only, instead of smooching, it's killing people. We're seeing the U.S. use non-lethal weapons in some capacity already. U.S. Coast Guard vessels use non-lethal ammunition as well as propeller entangling nets to stop high-speed vessels, and Navy boarding teams use non-lethal and lethal weapons when searching suspect vessels. But, non-lethal weapons just aren't as sexy as the ones that explode. That's why defense policymakers have been focusing more on acquiring traditional weapons, like hypersonic missiles. As a result, funding for developing non-lethal weapons has been low over the last decade. As Colonel Leinbach describes it, U.S. forces are prepared for the big fight. They're getting ready for the NFL football game and the Super Bowl. But U.S. adversaries are playing soccer, and they're scoring at will, and the U.S. doesn't have people on the field. Leinbach hopes to reframe non-lethal weapons as part of an entire spectrum between lethal force and no force. This could be an important component that the U.S. military needs in order to counter China, which is why I nominate Nickelodeon to be a U.S. military subcontractor. And this show is possible because of viewer support. So as a thank you to my fans who support China Uncensored through the crowdfunding website Patreon, or the exclusive social media platform Locals, I'll answer one of their questions. Today's question comes from Mountain Man 22 on Locals. How does the team feel about Rumble? I've been trying to watch over there to get you guys that sweet, sweet ad revenue. Would you encourage more of your 50-cent followers to go there? Rumble is nice to have as an alternative to YouTube. China Uncensored has an official channel there with videos dating back to 2019. Here's the challenge. Our videos there get about 1,000 views, compared to about 100,000 views on YouTube, which means there's almost no ad revenue through Rumble. This isn't just about China Uncensored, it's a matter of Rumble just not being very popular right now. If everyone on YouTube starts switching over to Rumble, fantastic. But until then, we need to stay on YouTube as our main platform. Thanks for your question and your support, Mountain Man. And thanks to everyone else who supports China Uncensored on Locals. Join us and you'll get cool perks like me answering your questions on the show. Check out chineuncensored.locals.com. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.